Hi, I'm Fidel Master Levy Cherbolenko, and in this series I explore the typical mistakes of people rated anywhere between 1000 and 2000. This is a first reaction, no engine analysis, of a chess.com game played between 1526 versus 749. Let's start. Alright, so white played e4, c6, knight c3, d5, the Caro-Kann defense. e5, okay, that's already a little bit weird move. We typically don't play like this e5 and knight c3. Usually we play, first of all, we usually play d4, and after d5, then we play, besides other stuff, e5, right? But then we have this nice pawn chain that we can fortify by playing c3. If black ever goes c5, trying to undermine white's center, white can reinforce it, play c3, so that after cd, we can take back with a pawn and thus keep our pawn center, which the pawn on d4 defends our key e5 pawn. Right, so that's how we keep the pawn structure intact. But if we go knight c3, and then we go e5, there's two problems here. One, black can play now himself d4, and thus disrupt our earlier plan. Now we will isolate the e5 pawn from the d2 pawn, right? If we go d4, then we cannot play d4 ourselves, and so we will isolate our pawn, and then the pawn will be weaker. And two, even if they do allow us to play d4, they then can play c5, and when we play c5, we cannot then play pawn to c3 and strengthen our center. So if we do go d4, we go c5, and then we either take or they take back on, or they just take a pawn on d4, we'll have to take back with a queen or another piece, but then we no longer have a pawn on d4, which means that the e5 pawn will be weaker. So that's why this combination of knight c3 and e5 is not good, is inaccurate. So I mean, instead of this, white could have just played knight f3. Knight f3 is okay because even if now black plays d4, yes, they can, but white did not commit to e5. So white could just move a knight somewhere, let's say here, for example, then we can play d3, and then we have a nice pawn chain. So the pawn is not isolated. So it's okay here to allow d4, but not okay if you have a pawn on e5, because then it might become a weak target. Okay, so this is already inaccurate by white. So black played c5, interesting. This is so black seizes this opportunity, the fact that white did not yet play d4, and c3, and now already it's too late. If white now plays d4, black just takes, and white will have to take with a queen, which is not white's goal. White want to have a pawn on d4, but for that they need to move a knight away, play c3, d4, but takes way too much time, and if black want to prevent that, they can just play d4 themselves. So yeah, already this is fine for black. Let's see, so white played d4, yeah, this I don't like at all. Bishop f5. I mean, black could have just taken actually, and now after queen d4, black would like to play knight c6 immediately, but then white just takes. But I mean, black would just play here e6, and next knight to c6. And the queen is the worst piece you can develop early in the opening, because then your opponent will develop his minor pieces with tempo, right? So the queen is the last piece you want to develop in the opening. You should prioritize minor piece development, especially the king side pieces, because most of the time you're gonna castle kingside, then you should castle quickly, and then maybe think about the heavy pieces, right? And already this is advantage for black. Already black has a very nice play. For example, let's say white goes knight f3, black would play knight c6, attack the queen. Let's say queen moves back, wasting a tempo. Now black could play, for example, I don't know, let's say bishop c5, potentially threatening queen b6, attacking on f2, right? We can also play knight g7, and then either knight g6 attacking the e5 pawn, or knight f5, controlling the d4 square. There's also the idea of queen c7 instead of queen b6 attacking the e5 pawn, right? So black has good play. So this is what black should have done. You should always profit in this kind of positions and take on d4 if your opponent cannot take back with a pawn. So that's why bishop f5 I think is a bit inaccurate. White play knight f3. Yes, that makes sense, but maybe what about just DC? Why not just take a free pawn? I think this also makes some sense, right? Because now, so we just took a free pawn, attack the d5 pawn. Now, if we play d4, I think we can just play knight b5, attacking the pawn. And if they give us a check, queen a5, the knight is guarded by the queen, by the bishop, right? So we can just go like bishop d2, and so black just wasted a tempo, and so this doesn't work. So we have to play like e6, and if we play e6, maybe we can even play like bishop e3. It stops both d4 and bishop takes c5, right? Now if we take, we just take. And so I think this is okay. And now actually, by the way, if black makes a random move, let's say h6, we can play knight to b5, because now this square is very weak for black, right? Queen a5, we just go c3, it's no big deal. Even knight d6, that's a great outpost, right? Protecting by 2 pawns. So this is already a huge advantage for white. So I think white could have played dc with advantage. Instead of white played knight f3, this also makes sense. Now if black takes on d4, we can actually take with a knight, with tempo, right, and attack the bishop. So this also makes some sense. But the only thing is black can now play e6, and now already if we take, we should take back with a bishop. And so maybe this is, I guess this is worse than d takes c5. I think that was a better move. Yeah, so this is what black actually did. Bishop b5 check. Right, that's fine. Knight to c6. Let's see, castles. I guess that's okay. Bishop g4 black played. Interesting. Pinning the knight, which the knight controls d4. So black wants to put pressure on d4 and by extension on the e5 pawn, right? But black's knight is also pinned. So this is not yet real pressure. Let's see, h3. Interesting, h3, attacking the bishop. Okay. Ooh, h5, wow. This is unexpected. Let's look first of all at the obvious variation. Bishop takes f3. Queen takes f3, cd. I mean, just knight e2, threatening knight. This is a temporary pawn sacrifice by white, but I think white should be okay. Let's see. So now we're threatening knight takes d4, because the knight is pinned, so it's not really guarding the pawn. We have to play, let's say, bishop c5. Here we have a couple of solutions. There is rook d1, right, and then knight takes d4. There is queen d3, right? There's even this crazy move b4, deflecting the bishop. And now we take knight takes d4. We take the pawn back, right? But now we're also threatening knight takes c6, bc, bishop takes c6. You know, there's also rook b1 ideas, pressure on the bishop, pressure on the b7 pawn. There's ideas like queen b3 with tempo, attacking the bishop, bishop moves, and then queen a4, reinforcing the pressure on the knight. So there's a bunch of ideas. There's also just a normal move like queen d3, for example, right? Again, threatening knight takes d4. And after bishop takes d4, queen takes d4, and we cannot take over knight because it is pinned. There's also this idea of queen g4, double attack. We exploit the fact that black's bishop left g7, so it's now unprotected, right? So queen g4, double attack, attacking g7 and d4, right? For example, let's say we play g6 or something, we go knight takes d4. If bishop takes d4, queen takes d4. But now we're playing g6, black has weakened his dark squares, and now we have his bishop, which then can exploit. So for example, if black goes like knight e7, we could play like bishop g5, or, right, potentially h6. So we have this bishop to exploit very weak dark squares. And so queen g4, I think, is pretty good. That's a typical idea. When you see a bishop leave, the rule of thumb is when you see a bishop leave f8 without a knight on f6, you should always consider queen g4. You typically don't have queen g4 if there's knight on f6, you know. But if there's no knight on f6 and we move f8 bishop, always think about queen g4. That's a rule of thumb, a typical idea. So, so yeah, I think this is fine. I think this would have been fine for white. The question is, what if bishop h5? Yeah, this would be an interesting situation here. I mean, maybe, yeah, this is a little bit annoying pin actually. Quite an annoying pin. I mean, I guess I could just take, I suppose, bishop takes, and now just some developing move, maybe like rook e1 or bishop f4 or something, or yeah. Maybe bishop to protect the e5 pawn, right? Rook e1, bishop 4. But I think black is fine here, because typically like this bishop is usually maybe not the best, or but in this case it's a very good bishop. It's very annoying pin against the knight, and like this pawn is in danger, the e5 pawn. So I think this would have been a safe bet. This is probably the best move by black. Would have been bishop h5, a very safe bet. Yeah, and I think black would have been fine. But h5 is kind of crazy. But I see the point. Let's see, no, why didn't I take? Now, the point, what is the point? This is sometimes a typical idea, but not always does it work. Let's see. The point is that after hgg, black opens up his rook, and then after the knight moves, their idea is to go queen h4, and then checkmate, checkmate white's king on the h file. That's the basic idea. But let's see if it works. Because actually, I think white can prevent black's queen from coming to h4. For example, the easiest is just to play knight g5. That cuts off black's diagonal, right? Queen's diagonal. So now we cannot play queen h4, queen h1. And so what do? I mean, f6 doesn't work, we just go knight e6. The queen is still blocked now by his own f6 pawn, right? And so it's just double attack, and we're just up a piece, and it's completely winning. So f6 doesn't work. Bishop e7 we could play, yes. But bishop e7 blocks his queen. So now we could play, let's say, queen, g4, and now his queen is blocked. And if he takes, we just take either with a bishop or with a queen, and white is completely winning. So bishop e7 also doesn't cut it. cd, and so what cd? Just queen takes d4, the knight is pinned. It's completely fine for white. So I think white is just winning. I think this is an incorrect sacrifice by black. It was an incorrect sacrifice. So queen d3 is actually a mistake. I think queen d3 is a mistake. White absolutely should have taken a bishop. c4 black played. That's a little bit weird. Usually moves like this are not good. When white has this kind of pawn center, black should put pressure on the base, on the d4 pawn. Because if the d4 pawn becomes weak, the e5 pawn becomes weak. It's usually a very bad idea to release the tension. Because now d4 is no longer attacked. And so now white has a very sturdy pawn center, which is a big advantage in chess, to have a sturdy pawn center. If you control the center, typically from the center, if you have domination in the center, it means you have domination usually on the upper side as well. Because the center is, that's why it's the center. You control from it both sides at the same time. And so that's, I think, a big conceptual mistake by black. Queen to e3, makes sense. a6, what? This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. Takes, knight a4. Why not take a3 bishop? Just take knight g5. The knight is protected like 10 times. Completely winning. Just completely winning. So, I should have just taken the previous. Yeah, that's a mistake. Queen a5. Attacking the knight. But it's a little bit of a waste of time. Because now I can just play b3. And now the queen is misplaced in the corner. Doesn't do anything. It's prone to attacking. So, that's just a bad move. b3, of course. cb. Yeah, okay, white played cb. It also would have made sense to play ab, to open up the a file for the rook, and also to take towards the center, to have more centralized pawns, But the plus of cb, on the other hand, is that white opens up the c file, and then puts pressure on, potentially on the c6 pawn. It might become weak, right? So cb also makes sense. g6. It's just a waste of time. I guess black's threat is bishop h6, but that's not the real threat. White can just move a queen away, and the bishop on c1 is guarded. So, I think black should have either moved the bishop to f5 or taken the knight on f3. Probably taking the knight would have been the best, the easiest. I think, yeah, that would have been the best move. g6 is just a mistake. Finally, white takes. Yeah, this is funny. Knight d2. Knight g5 would have been more active, attacking f7. Why not knight g5? Queen f4, attacking here. Attacking on g4. Whenever you have a choice between a passive and an active move, you should choose the active move. Knight d2 is passive. Now the knight on d2 has the moves. Oops. Cannot go here, cannot go here, cannot go here. Why would you put a knight on a passive square? It also blocks the bishop. It also blocks bishop's diagonal. Knight d2 is inaccurate. Bishop h6. Yeah, this is what I thought. Queen g3. Queen g3 is okay. But why not play with tempo? Why not play queen c3? When we're up material, we want to trade. When we're up material, we want to trade material even more, especially the queens, because we want to simplify. Because if your opponent has the queen on the board and many pieces, maybe although he's down material, he can cheat you somehow. He can still checkmate you potentially. But if you exchange many pieces, if you exchange the queens, the game becomes more simple and it's easier to convert. So why not play queen c3 with tempo, right? That way, black should either take or waste time on moving the queen, so that they cannot, so that they don't lose the queen, and move it somewhere so that they can defend the pawn, and so that gives you the time to play more useful moves. Whereas when you play queen g3, black doesn't really care about the g4 pawn. They can continue their development. Okay, so this is a little bit inaccurate. 1 and 2, it actually hangs the d2 knight. Now black can just take bishop d2, and then queen takes d2. So I'm curious if black saw it. They played knight e7. What a mistake. Just bishop d2. It's a free piece. Bishop, rook, queen, rook. Now black is back into the game. And if white is not careful, black will next play queen h6 and then checkmate white on h1. Do you see? So this is another lesson. When you're winning material, don't relax. Don't relax, that's one. And two, don't hang pieces. Like, when you're winning materially, the goal is not to win as quickly as possible. The goal is not to find checkmate in one move. When you're winning materially, the goal is not to lose your material advantage. When you're winning materially, the first thing you should do is you should consolidate. Not find the checkmate. You should consolidate. Defend all your pieces. Defend all your pieces, and then you're gonna win automatically. Maybe not in 2 moves, but you're gonna win automatically and for sure. You don't wanna win quickly. You wanna win for sure. Okay, so that's what you should do. You're up material, make sure all your pieces are consolidated. That's where you're gonna win for sure. So 97, what a mistake. Rook d1. Now white protects his knight. Well, that makes sense. Knight f5. Okay. Queen takes g4. Okay. Rook b8. Alright. A little bit activating the rook. I guess it makes some sense. Knight f3. That's a good move. Takes. I mean, why not take with a rook? Why take with a d rook and keep the rook on a blocked file? It doesn't make any sense. Why not take with this rook and now have 2 more centralized rooks? One rook attacks c6, another rook protects the important d4 pawn. This makes way more sense. Yeah, this is inaccurate. Rook b4, okay. Rook takes c6, okay. Rook takes a4. Yeah, I mean rook takes a4. Just a mistake. Now white can either take the rook, or here, as he played rook c8, also good, right? Taking this rook, everything wins. Here. At this point already black is completely lost. Rook f1, white is just up what? A rook, completely win. Here, attacking the queen. Interesting. Okay, but we just take, bam, time out, but white was completely winning anyway. Alright, I hope you enjoyed. If so, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.